Okay, hello everyone. I'm Casey Grant, and I'm here with my coworker Josh Fisher, among a few other coworkers in the audience. And this is our first episode of Remote R&D with Baker AV. First and foremost, we hope that everyone is staying safe and healthy. And our hearts really go out to those who've been affected by the coronavirus thus far. And we want you to know that however we can be, we are here for you guys. But we thought that just because we're confined to our houses doesn't mean that we can't continue growing and learning. So we really thank you for embarking on this journey with us.
So today we're blessed to be sitting here with Steve Lamphear from Barco, and he's going to talk to us about their remote monitoring and management platform, which is called Overture. Not only is this a valuable solution to have when we're business as usual, but given the current climate, we put our heads together and thought that we can educate some folks on the need for remote support for AV and web conferencing infrastructure during this climate as well. So Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
No, I'm happy to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for inviting me.
So, Steve, could you tell us more about the remote monitoring and management specifically for AV and who this would benefit the most?
Yeah, so, remote monitoring and management for AV is an IP-based solution. So it's software defined, so it falls in that software defined AV category. And what it does is there's a little piece of software, a relay piece of software that exists on a client network that's actually communicating with all of the devices that exist on that network, whether they're AV devices or sometimes even possibly facilities type of things like hardware or climate control or lighting. And so a AV manager is able now to get real-time information about all of the hardware that lives on that network. And so the core value really starts with that person. It starts with the AV manager and giving them the ability now, given all this insight into what's happening, to be able to very proactively and predictively maintain all of their meeting hardware so that the rooms have the maximum uptime. All too often, I think we're seeing where we've got maybe a small team of people that are responsible for a large volume of meeting rooms. So that requires them to physically try to be in one every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks just to make sure everything's going okay. The idea behind RMM is that rather than having those regular visits and becoming responsive and reactive to maybe your internal customer or external customer requirements and trouble tickets, you're predictively maintaining things. So you've got a maximum uptime. So as a result, that impacts everybody. It means that I've got better meeting room experiences for my users. They don't walk into any surprises and discover that the projector isn't working that day. I've got better data as well. So that since all these interactions and alerts are logged, I now have better data available to my technology decision makers and the CTO, who needs to understand how is our investment in technology providing a return for us. So really it's the entire spectrum of stakeholders that benefit from a solution like RMM.
Awesome. So you mentioned that it's a device that's living on the client network. Can you get a little more specific about how that functions within the IT landscape there, and how an AV integrator would put that in for a client to give them visibility?
Absolutely. So in the case of Overture, Overture uses an architecture that's an industry standard. It's called hub and spoke architecture. And so there's a hub that's hosted by Barco in the cloud. And that hub provides all of your user interactions. So the ability for an integrator to go up and set up a customer network is all done through cloud interactions inside a browser. And so there's never any custom programming required for any of this. It's all configuration from that browser-based access. And what it's doing is actually communicating with that on-premises relay software that I just spoke about. So when it comes to the level of effort that's required to set up a network and start monitoring things, we've had instances where hundreds of classrooms in a higher education campus were actually brought online in a matter of a couple of hours. just to go in there and make sure that as a baseline, everything's connected to the network and I know that it's reporting a healthy status. So those two pieces of software are really the core pieces of what's required for an integrator to deploy Overture. From there is configuration of the rooms and what the user experiences need to be. The spoke aspect of this might actually have more than one. So you've always got a single hub, but the spoke aspect means I could have a spoke at each one of my customer locations, individual buildings on a campus, so that I'm getting real-time information, but also when I'm now remotely managing, which is really the other side of RMM. You know, I've got the monitoring side of it. The other side of it is the management side. What do I do when there's a problem? You know, so now I'm able to evaluate what that alert condition is, determine if it requires in-present or on-premises involvement, in-room involvement from a technician, or remotely manage that from a distance and be able to take corrective action there. So by having that spoke relay software in each one of my individual buildings or cities or locations, I'm now able to respond to things very, very quickly with minimal latency.
That's fantastic.
So IT has had RMM on their network side, their server side, workstations, et cetera, for years, but AV has kind of been a black hole for in-house IT, and we as integrators want to bridge that gap. Can you discuss a little bit the evolution of Overture and how AV integrators are leveraging this for supplemental support?
Yeah, I definitely can. So Overture was actually based on a technology that Barco acquired about 5 years ago, or maybe a little bit more than that. And that technology, as called show control, has been in place for decades. So it's built on a very reliable platform. And we're doing things like controlling themed entertainment at places like the Smithsonian, major amusement parks. So what we did was we actually took that technology and adapted it for the enterprise. And when we did that, what we really learned as we brought that to market and said, hey, we've got a new control solution that's completely IP-based, that doesn't require any proprietary hardware in the room. And in most cases, it doesn't even require any type of touch panel or processor in the room. As we brought that to market, what we really learned when we spoke with partners like you guys and some of our other partners was that the really big need was about the monitoring component of what we brought to market with that whole control side of it. Our users were telling us, hey, you know, it's great that we can control things, but very often something's down and we don't know it till somebody picks up the phone and is kind of angry that they've had to wait 15 minutes, that they couldn't start their conference call, or we get a surprise that something's not working because we haven't been in the room on any kind of regular basis. So what we did was we really started to leverage and enhance our monitoring tools. So that we've added, in addition to those two components that I just described, a multi-tenant capability to our technology, so that now from a single pane of glass, not only can we monitor one of our customers, we can monitor every customer from a single pane of glass. And so now integrators are looking at that and going, wow, I can look at every customer that I have across the board in a single pane of glass, see what the current status is of all of their hardware, make sure it's connected, make sure that rooms are healthy, and receive real-time alerts in that same dashboard that let me know what's occurring. And then it's about intelligent response. So now, can I remotely put that room back into default condition? Can I remotely troubleshoot that device, restart it? If you've been in AV longer than a day, you probably know that a lot of times just a simple restart takes care of 99% of issues that you might encounter with certain hardware. So we give you the ability to do all those things remotely, and then only roll a truck to go on premises when it's actually required. And maybe you're even doing that now in an intelligent way, where you're looking at hardware and saying, hey, it's a laser projector. This laser projector, to maintain its life, requires that you clean or replace the filter every 75 hours. Let's make sure that we're doing that. Hey, it's been in use 70 hours. Let's deploy somebody now to clean that and make sure that we're maintaining that projector. Maybe it's even an older projector, and this is a use case that maybe is starting to expire, but it still applies to other types of hardware. But if you're looking at an older projector that still is lamp-based, You're able to look at the number of hours that projector's been in use and go, wow, that lamp's been in use N number of hours. That means it only has 10 hours left. So now I have the opportunity to go back to my customer and say, look, the lamp is about to expire. We can either schedule somebody to come on site and make sure that you continue to have maximum uptime with your meeting room, or we can consult with them about whether it's time for them to upgrade and move into newer technology that's more laser-based or more appropriate for that meeting environment.
That proactive focus is really great, because anytime a room is down, that's costing somebody money. You know, that's time that they would be having a meeting that they now can't have that meeting because there's a piece of equipment down. So that has a lot of value.
Yeah, and studies have been done, and there's numerous ones out there. If you just do a quick Google, where you start to go, well, what's the average salary in my area? In the Northeast, that happens to be about $70,000 a year. So you take $70,000 a year and you say, well, this person's time is worth this much an hour, and I've now got 6 or 8 or more people in a meeting room who are now all making that average amount per hour. So every minute lost, every quarter hour lost becomes a major loss of time and money to every customer across the board. So that's the thing about RMM as well, I think, Casey, is, you know, I think often we get the question, you know, what's the company profile look like? You know, is it a financial house? Is it medical? Is it, you know, it's really across the board. We're all looking at ways to be more responsive, maximize our uptime, and apply some cost saving measures along the way.
Sure. Absolutely.
So you mentioned having a single pane of glass for supporting not only just multiple rooms, but multiple locations. So it seems like this would give an integrator like Baker, where we support multiple clients, a lot more visibility and the ability to help them before the meeting actually starts. So it allows IT to scale. So can you tell us a little bit about how that works with regards to multi-location?
Yeah, definitely. So, you know, that hub and spoke architecture that I described is really the crux of it. So I have a hub and spoke for each one of my unique clients. So that's an instance of Overture. And so that instance of Overture can be deployed to each one of my customers uniquely. So it's completely segmented from every other customer. So, which is important. You know, customers don't want to inadvertently have other people being able to pull their own, their reporting. They don't want people to be able to manage their room. So it's important that we keep all those things segmented. So you have that hub and spoke appliance or a bit of software that I've already talked about for each unique customer instance. And then as an overlay to all of that, then you've got Overture RMM. And Overture RMM is actually connecting to each one of those instances uniquely. It's always done over a secure socket layer. There's only a single port that has to be required for this communication. It's port 443. So it's highly secure. Everything's done in a secure socket layer. There's no additional ports. You know, sometimes when you look at software-defined AV or even software-defined monitoring, you'll discover that 10 or more ports have to be opened up in the firewall. And those can't be defined by the IT administrator at all. So Overture has that one single port, that 443, that in most cases is already open for HTTPS traffic. So that structure allows it to be very scalable, and that everybody has a highly secure solution. Everybody's instance is unique, and that now I've got that single pane of glass where I can build not only a dashboard that shows me all my customers in a single view, but I can now take and create additional views. So if I have different employees that are responsible for different customers, or employees that are responsible for very specific functionality on a customer site, maybe they're working with a facilities manager to make sure that facilities are being monitored, they can have their own dashboard view. So when they drill down into customer site, they're again seeing the information that's most relevant. And that's really the idea behind the single pane of glass. We want relevant information so we know in real time everything that's happening, but always the ability to drill down very quickly, get to the most relevant information so you can take action proactively to make sure that your customers' hardware, your meeting rooms are up as much as they possibly can be.
That's fantastic. So earlier you kind of mentioned scheduling. Can you talk a little bit more about that scheduling and what are the biggest advantages you see of being able to have that feature?
So scheduling and experiences all kind of tie together for Overture. So Overture is also really good at creating recipes to create experience. We call them behaviors. And it's very easy inside Overture to create a behavior, for example, that says, hey, when a user walks into a meeting room, turn that room on and turn on the lights, turn on the default presentation device. Or if it happens to be a wireless presentation like a Barco click share, that when a user accesses the Barco click share to share content, that the display is turned on and that display now is set to the correct input for sharing content. So these behaviors follow an approach that's very common where you build a recipe once and you can now take that behavior that says, hey, turn on the room or turn on the display based on a click share button, and I can apply it to every room that I have on my campus. And even if one room happens to have a Barco projector or somebody told me once that other companies besides Barco make projectors. I'm not sure that I believe it, but if you can think of that, it wouldn't matter if the room had a Barco projector in one room and another projector from a different manufacturer, a different model in another room. My recipe works in every single room. So I don't have to go in and custom program each room. So these experiences now can be scheduled as well. So by looking at Microsoft Exchange, we can turn a room on and prepare it for a certain type of meeting based on what's been booked in Microsoft Exchange. Take that room at the end of that meeting, make sure that nobody's still remaining occupied in the room, kind of straggling behind, having a last minute conversation, and now put that room back in a low power state. And then from a more global perspective, you can even inside Overture, we have our own scheduling utility on top of the Exchange stuff in Microsoft Office 365, where now I can do global scheduling as well. So not only am I scheduling experiences and things like that and automating experiences, but I'm now able to do things like turn all of my rooms off by groups. So all of my rooms on a certain floor or in a certain building or in a certain city can all be turned on and off based on the schedule that I create. It's very easy to create, just like creating a schedule or a meeting inside Microsoft Outlook. So our customers have told us that brings them a lot of value. We have one customer in particular. They have about 200 meeting rooms. Their response to us was, hey, just by putting rooms in a low power state during the daytime, turning our rooms off at night and on weekends, we realize an energy cost savings of about $1,000 per room per year.
Wow.
So for them, that's about a $200,000 year savings in energy cost. So everybody's costs are going to be a little bit different based on their hardware and things like that. But if you start to apply those things, you can really start to realize how scheduling has these huge benefits for not just improving experiences, but also realizing some cost savings.
I think that's fantastic. I love the organization aspect of it. I have to admit, I'm kind of a sucker for organization. So being able to set the rooms, that automation is really important, not only for organization, but it's a huge time saving. And it also cuts down on the amount of time that people are utilizing their meeting time just to set up the equipment. So being able to completely remove that from what you need to do just to have a meeting is really important to me.
And it's kind of revolutionary. You know, if you look at what we've all been familiar with for the last decade plus, when you wanted to apply those types of energy cost savings, what you had to do was custom program individual devices to work as a unit, and then custom program the scheduling for that. And then if you ever had to make a change to one of the devices, or if you wanted to do that same application of energy savings in another room, you custom program that room, or you had a change order to make a change to a single room. With RMM, Overture RMM specifically, you can schedule that on off at any level in that hierarchy that you just described, Katie. So if I want to apply it to one room, or an entire group of rooms, I'm just scheduling a single command to run anywhere in that hierarchy. It's fairly revolutionary and markedly different from what we've all known for a long time in our AV industry.
Yeah, that's really incredible. So I kind of wanted to dig into the analytics aspect of that as well. So one thing that I was thinking when I think room analytics is space utilization. What kind of insight can you give on how Barco Overture can contribute to space utilization?
Yeah, so inside Overture, since everything in Overture is IP based, we're able to get constant feedback from all those devices of what's happening with those devices. So every time there's a user interaction with a device, whether they're accessing a BYOD control panel, an in-room control panel, interacting with that hardware directly, or even if I've created an alert that says follow a certain condition on hardware, I'm able now to go in and have all those things logged. And so that now becomes part of my analytics. So Overture takes all that data that we're getting from all those devices, and right out of the box, we give you a number of reports. So things like, you know, how many hours were my devices powered on this month? How many hours was my room in use this month? And so now you can start to take that data and those reports back and start to look at historically, how are my rooms being used today versus 30 days ago versus this time last year? How is this room that I've configured with a very specific set of technology being used more or less than another room that's maybe right next door or down the hall that maybe is differently enabled? So now you can, it gives us the ability to go in and again, help all our customers invest their dollars more intelligently. So is there hardware that's underutilized? Maybe we don't need to continue investing in that. You know, I talked with somebody recently who had a customer that insisted they have a media appliance that could support DVDs, and then they discovered that nobody ever used it. You know, people were sharing that content from their laptop. So help our customers put their investments in the correct place. But also if I've got a room that's underutilized, maybe I need to enhance the technology in that space. You know, sometimes it'll also reveal other things to us. So Josh and I were joking about this recently, where we realized that sometimes there's external conditions. One's closer to the bathroom. Maybe there's a credenza near that conference table that people can put birthday cakes and pizzas on. But now you can actually go in and say, well, are the rooms enabled appropriately for the types of meetings we have? And if one's still getting more use, maybe it does need that additional piece of furniture. So it's not just technology investments, it's in your entire meeting room experience and where your dollars should be spent.
Absolutely. And, you know, in addition, you could have a training issue. You know, do people just simply not know how to work the equipment? So it lets you approach your spaces from completely different angles and really get to the root of what's happening in there. So
Josh and Katie, I'm sure you've seen this. Have you ever walked into a meeting room and there's a PowerPoint or maybe like a front and back, a laminated card that tells users how to use that room? That has become kind of standard. Maybe even a bigger company, there's a PowerPoint that exists on a shared drive that tells people how to use the meeting rooms. The idea behind RMM, and more importantly, those behaviors and recipes, are that users shouldn't be required to get that training anymore. Users shouldn't be required to go and refer to a manual. But by creating the really intelligent automations for a room to create a bespoke experience in that room, so that the room responds to how I conduct my meeting. Hey, I'm sharing content. If the display is not on, just let the display turn on by itself. I shouldn't need to go and find a way to do that. So that we get away from, wow, our users are undertrained, and really start to focus on how do we make it so that the moment our users walk in, they can start to be productive and go through what their meeting agenda is without having to spend 15 minutes of looking at a training manual, fiddling with a touchscreen that's probably programmed a little bit differently than one down the hall has by another manufacturer or another integrator partner. This provides us very consistent experiences, and the automations really take all that kind of training concerns off the table so that we're making things as easy for our users as we possibly can.
Sure. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that having information on underutilized spaces could actually turn a source of revenue for a company. It could be either downsizing or taking those spaces and turning them into co-working spaces.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So it really all adds up to taking that data and helping us make better decisions. So
yeah,
so
absolutely.
not just the proactive maintenance, but ongoing. How do we make better technology investments and or different technology investments in different areas of the company based on the data that I'm getting back?
Yeah, definitely. So what can you tell us about the control aspect?
So control is, for Overture, it's a major feature. We really think the core functionality that our users are going to receive and the best value they'll receive is that monitoring remote management component of things. But without the ability to actually remotely manage a room, knowing what's happening doesn't have a lot of value to us. So having that remote management on top of that, and then the third leg of that stool, it really becomes the in-room control. So, and the way that Overture does in-room control is also pretty unique. So I mentioned at the outset that Overture is a software-based solution. So what that means is that different from other companies, we have no proprietary touch panel for our room. As a matter of fact, our philosophy is when most users walk into a conference room, they probably brought a touch panel with them. It might be their mobile device, it might be a tablet, or if I really, really wanted to offer it to my users, I could even provide a tablet in that space and put it in guided access or kiosk mode so that they do have that in-room control panel. It's a browser-based control panel. And what happens is when you book a meeting room, for example, in Microsoft Exchange, you might get a response back from your Exchange server that says, hey, welcome to meeting room 300. Here's the link to control this meeting room while you're there. So now that user, when they're there, they can bring that up on their own mobile device and be able to manage the room for anything that maybe we didn't anticipate an automation for. So the value of that becomes that every one of those meeting rooms is always going to work the same way. So whether I'm a user from Tokyo that's using a meeting room in New York, or I'm from Texas and using a meeting room in New York, and so I've got a language barrier. Sorry, Texas. Whatever it happens to be, you've got all of your preferences for language, and you've got all the branding elements around that. But these user interfaces are very consistent because they're based on your unique roles, your unique permissions, and your unique preferences. And they're automatically and dynamically generated for you every time you access that meeting room. So you will always have the most recent user interface because it's dynamically generated using your most recent roles and permissions. And every room will always work the same way. So you'll know exactly where the buttons are. You don't have that confusion that sometimes happens in our industry where you have a control panel that's been custom programmed, and maybe you have 2 or 3 flavors of that for 2 or 3 different user types. And then those rooms were completely different than another room in another wing of the building that maybe was programmed by the same company, but a different programmer. So it gives you that very consistent experience that I think we're all looking for, to make sure that we can walk into a room and anticipate what we're going to encounter when we get in there.
Absolutely.
So as an AV provider in a perfect world, of course, we want to build all new rooms. But what happens when we're scaling in maybe 2 or 3 rooms at a client, but there's also some legacy gear in there in some other rooms that we're probably going to phase in later. How can we use Overture, obviously, in our new projects, but in legacy rooms as well?
So Overture, I think our audience is starting to understand that Overture is a very broad platform, providing everything from the control aspect in the room, right through the remote monitoring, the management aspect, as well as the analytics that come on the other end of that. But we don't ask customers to necessarily adopt every single one of those components. So if you wanted to use Overture for just its monitoring and management capabilities, we actually have the ability to go into legacy rooms and be an overlay, just the management layer for that existing installation. So whether that's a solution that's been in place from somebody like a Crestron or Harman or somebody like that, or something else, you're now able to leave that solution in place. Overture now becomes an additional layer on top of that, where I'm getting all my real-time monitoring. I'm getting the ability now to manage it, so that Overture is now sending commands to that in-room processor for that third-party solution. And so I'm able to have all the same functionality as I would inside an Overture project, but I'm just using Overture for its management monitoring layer capabilities for my existing rooms. We did learn something interesting, Josh, recently. We had a customer that took that exact approach that I just described. And that customer had about 400 meeting rooms. And they said, well, we're going to start by deploying Overture in 20 of these rooms as an overlay to an existing solution. And then as our rooms age out or as our needs change, we'll continue to expand from there. They ended up really, really speeding up their timeline. And the reason why is they discovered that with Overture as that management monitoring layer on top of the existing hardware, that those rooms in the first 6 months were the only rooms that never had a trouble ticket opened by one of their in-house customer users. So that was a big revelation to them that, hey, Overture doesn't necessarily have to be something that we install when we have a brand new room, but it's something that we can use as an overlay and start to get value from it immediately without necessarily having to make a big change in a room, or even walk away from a recent technology investment. So sometimes we are working with customers that haven't had their existing solution in place for a long time. So they're not willing to walk away from that investment, but they need that additional capability that Overture offers, and so they'll adopt it for that reason.
Yeah, excellent. I was going to ask you if you had any use cases on why this is so critical to a company's day-to-day operations, but I think, say no more. I mean, that really illustrates how valuable this can be.
Yeah. It's interesting. Overture's licensing model is by the meeting room, and so it has a very friendly point of entry into the market, very, very friendly way of it. So very often, sometimes people go, well, I only have 3 meeting rooms, or I only have 5 meeting rooms. I'm not one of the customers that has 100 meeting rooms. So how is this relevant to me? The truth of the matter is, whether you have 3 meeting rooms or 3,000 meeting rooms, what your activity is in that room is critical to you. You need to know that it's always going to be functional, that you're not wasting time, whether it's time wasted in one meeting room or multiple meeting rooms, you're still losing dollars. So that becomes a critical thing. So you're right. The use case really applies across the spectrum to small and large enterprise equally, and it applies to every customer profile. So, awesome. And we do have some great use cases that I can share with you guys, and you can share with the audience as well, for some of our key accounts around the world, and we'd love to share those case studies with you.
Casey, I believe you're muted.
Silly me. I had my daughter scream. She came running down the hall, and so I hit mute very quickly. Sorry about that. So I wanted to see if anyone in the audience had any questions for Steve on Barco Overture. All right.
I actually have one.
Okay, sure, Mike.
When it comes to, like you said, the legacy products, because we ran into that with another kind of concept we were going to use. Does everything all the different pieces, do they have to be on the network? And you might have already answered this, but you do work with the legacy products for Crestron, right? Because of the DM, some of the older DM products, They're kind of like dummy devices
Right.
on the transmitter side. Just wanted to get your input on that.
Yeah, so we do work with legacy devices. Off the top of my head, everything that's Series 2 and Series 3, as well as some specific devices on top of that. So with Overture, to speak with things directly, we do require an IP connection, comma. Having said that, you know, a lot of those legacy rooms that you just described, Mike, the only thing that has an IP connection in that space is the Crestron processor itself. So what we do in a scenario like that is, instead of trying to reach the devices individually, is we just speak directly to the processor. And that will then relay the command to the device to get a status back or to change its status. And then we take that status back and we update the Overture UI. So you don't have to make major changes in a room that's already outfitted with a legacy system where things don't all have a network connection. You simply take our Overture module and you drop it into your existing Crestron code. You do a little bit of naming alignment and recompile the code, and you're ready to go. So we're easily able to go in and manage those things without changing the existing infrastructure. Yeah, really good question. Thank you, Mike.
No, thank you. That was great.
Perfect. Does anyone else have any questions? All right.
So if we had some clients, we can obviously schedule some demos, or if we had customers that would like to see the product in depth, reach out to your rep here at Baker, and then we'll get with Steve and drill down into the product. Does that sound correct, Steve?
That's a great idea. That sounds perfect. So.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap. Thank you for joining us, everybody. And be sure to tune in next week, April 2nd, for the next installment of Remote R&D with Baker AV, where we will have our two favorite Aussies, Adam and David from Teleportivity. You can follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Baker Audio Visual, and on Twitter at Baker Audio. Hope you guys have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you.